Welcome to the Private Lenders Podcast with your hosts from Hard Money Bankers, Jason Balin and Chris Haddon. This podcast is sponsored by hardmoneymastermind.com.
Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the show. Today we are doing a deal spotlight podcast. We haven't done one of these in a while, but as they pop up, interesting deals that we closed, we do like to relay this information to the private lender world, to the audience, anyone checking out our YouTube channel, podcast, members of hardmoneymastermind.com, because hopefully these creative deals that are typically pretty good loan amounts teach you something, right? Hopefully you can take away something from how we did this deal, how we sourced it, how we structured it, funded it, everything else that you can apply to your own lending business and hopefully take down some trophy deals too.
Yeah, you may have, if you're on our Hard Money Bankers email list as well that we market to our borrowers and brokers and stuff like that, you may have seen this. We've kind of been marketing this here since we closed it just a few weeks ago. But again, if you are listening to this on iTunes or whatever, however you listen to your podcast, if you go to YouTube, Hard Money Mastermind is the handle, you'll be able to see some of the slides and some of the pictures.
Good point.
So you'll be able to see it. And if you're watching this on YouTube, great. You're in the right place. Either platform works. So I got a bunch of pictures. We got a write-up. Let's just start with let's put the write-up on the screen first. Let's just start with that. Yeah. And we can give a little bit more of a backstory if we need to. So here's a quick backstory of the deal. So a church owned a piece of land for a long period of time. They owned a piece of land forever. They were approached by a developer, and bear with me because it's going to take probably 2 minutes to explain the backstory, but it's a pretty interesting creative deal. So the developer approached the church and said, "Hey, I want to buy your land. I want to build this 180,000 square foot multifamily property on this land, and I will carve out 18,000 square feet out of the 180,000 square feet building for your church. And when we buy the land, I'd like to do it as a land lease, so you can keep the religious exemption on the taxes, and I will give you a big land lease fee, which was about $6 million for them to, as part of the land lease. Plus, I'll pay you a few $1,000s a month ongoing for a 99-year land lease." So that's originally how it was set up. I'm going to get back to this in a second. I just want to show you a few pictures just so you can kind of wrap your brain around what I said so far. So like back up 5 years ago, this is what it looked like 5 years ago. The piece of land, that's one side of it. Oops, hold on. And then this was the other side of it. So it was this whole street, whole block, called an acre, I think, give or take. So that was 5 years ago. And then as they started construction, this is early phase on construction. This is a little bit later in construction. And then as of like 5-6 months ago, this is what the whole building looks like. As of a few weeks ago, before we went to closing, this is what the building looked like. Okay. Just so you have kind of a good idea as we're speaking what the building looks like. I mean, it's 180,000 square feet on an acre of land, 10 units high in Washington, D.C., or 10 stories high in Washington, D.C. It's gigantic. So again, it's 100 and call it 60-something thousand square feet of multifamily, which was, 172 units or something like that. Plus, they carved out 18,000 square feet for the church. And we've got pictures of the church that I'm going to bring up here in a second. Just want to make sure you understand how we structured this. So what happened is the developer built the entire building. They're responsible for the whole building. They subdivided one lot into 6 lots. So the 6 lots were land lease lots from the church to the developer. The developer paid the church $6 million for this, plus for this land lease, plus a few $1,000s a month for a 99-year land lease. And then the church got to retain the 3 existing lots for themselves, which, in essence is the church. It's still one big building though, kind of like a condo regime, right? So the church's, unit, belongings, lot condo unit was 18,000 square feet of the 180,000 square feet. Okay. So they came to us because they started building this very, very nice church inside the 180,000 square feet. They built it in their 18,000 square foot footprint, and they had a $6 million. They had $6 million to start with, which they believed was underfunded. Maybe it wasn't underfunded, and they went over budget. I'm not 100% sure, but the $6 million wasn't enough to build the entire church. So they came to us for a loan of about $1.5 million, collateralized by their 3 lots and the 18,000 square foot component of the building, of the 180,000 square foot building. And they collateralized that. We dispersed $450,000 at closing for them to continue on their construction. I mean, when we were on site, and we'll show you pictures, I mean, there's dozens of contractors on site trying to.
Yeah, it's like 50 workers there, probably easy.
Trying to get this to the finish line. And then we did an $800,000 construction holdback for the remaining. So we're going to talk about some due diligence that we got, but in essence, the as-is value of the subject property was, $6-7 million. So, I mean, LTV wise, it was pretty darn low. And the guarantors of the building, very, very good credit. So that's kind of the meat and potatoes of it. And, we can go through some other pictures here. Anything else to add to that, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, one thing I wanted to point out is that we really don't do, or rarely do, construction loans on commercial properties. And we don't do it at all when they need a future value. And so this is something we discussed with our business partners too, related to this transaction. Like, obviously we all use ARV in lending on residential, right? You buy a property for 100 or 200, you put 100 into it, and then it's worth, 350 or whatever, 400. Future value is very, very common and normal in residential lending. It's different with commercial, like, because you could put, you could retrofit or build out or whatever, like a piece of commercial property, flex space, office, whatever it might be, spend a lot of money on it, and it's worth the exact same, right? It's just customizing it for whatever business wants to operate out of there. So an important part to take away is that we could have done this as a straight cash out refi. Like, they had $6 million in hard costs already put into this thing, and I think it appraised for maybe $7 million. The as-is value was there. So we did it with a construction holdback, but we really don't need any future value. Our as-is is plenty good to do a $1.5 million loan easily.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, commercial construction, resi construction are very, very different. And, I'm not to say that there's not an after repair value on commercial, but commercial assets in general are very challenging, right? Typically you're going off net operating income. There's no net operating income on a vacant building. It's very speculative of like what it's worth. This is an owner operated one, right? So, in essence, to properly underwrite that, you're going to, have to get pro forma financials based on, what's going to happen in there and back into it. This was just a collateral play, right? It was a collateral play. The church was still operational in a different location. They're bringing in income. They had a decent balance sheet. They had decent financials. The guarantors were strong. We're at a super low LTV. There's a lot of good things that are going. The developer was probably one of the biggest well-named developers in all of Washington, D.C. that had the 180,000, that built this entire building. So, like, not that this would happen, but, like, worst case scenario, in our opinion, is if they decide the church is in default with our loan, chances are they'll probably just pay our measly, $1.5 million loan off, to keep them in good standing because, so we don't foreclose on it. They got a $50 million loan to build this property to begin with. Now, again, that had nothing to do with ours. They only own 160,000 square feet of this, or 162,000 square feet. The other 18,000 was unencumbered, and that's what we collateralized. So if you look at this, actually, let me look at this picture. And I'm sorry if you're listening to this on iTunes, because you won't be able to fully follow along. But if you look at this is one big building. The church, in essence, is this sliver to the left. That's it internally. So here's some pictures from when we went out there, as well. Try to open up some of these. Yes, this is Dave in our office as well. For some reason, everyone got a hard hat except us two, Chris. We didn't get hard hats.
Yeah,
Everyone else got a hard hat.
It didn't make a whole lot of sense. It was about our group walking around is about 50% hard hats, which is which is kind of defeating the purpose. But
yeah, it was weird. They told us like we'd have to put on hard hats. It's like, okay, great. Well, they didn't ever give us a hard hat. So
true.
You know, here's some pictures and some videos. Oh, the other cool thing related to this is 18,000 square feet. It's not just like a sanctuary with like 300 members. There's a gigantic commercial kitchen in the basement. There's event space, there's classrooms, there's offices. There's daycare. Yep. They actually even have a coffee shop built in. So I'll just,
since I just parking garage, loading docks, like all kinds of stuff.
So I'm just going to put this on the screen real quick. So because this deal was a little bit complicated in general to understand, we don't typically do this, but you certainly could if as a hard money lender or a private lender just kind of starting and you're trying to raise capital, is we did a video walkthrough of this entire building so we could explain it to some capital investors, right? We didn't self-fund this. We co-lend with some of our capital sources or some of our private capital investors with us. I think 1 or 2 investors got involved in this deal with us. So like, it was hard to explain, you know, it wasn't a deal. It's like, hey, we're lending on this church. Here's the numbers. Like, you know, if they're a straight passive investor, maybe it's like, okay, cool. Sounds great, guys, do it. But like, it was a little bit more complicated. So we spent, you know, a few minutes and we put a video together so we could fully explain it, just kind of like we're fully explaining this deal in a podcast, right? And, you know, if you're out there trying to raise capital from investors, it might not be a bad idea, right? You know, back in the day, we used to go look at every property. I'm just talking like the first 500 to 1,000 properties, ourselves, our eyes, our camera, and the borrower, right? And sometimes the contractors as well. And we would walk through there with our camera and we would take pictures and videos of everything. We'd be like, hey, I'm at 123 Main Street, blah, blah, blah. Borrower's buying this for $60,000, needs $60,000 in renovations. You know, they got good credit. There's this, there's that. And then next thing you know, number one, if you're starting out and you're looking at a lot of deals, you might forget some of the things, right? So you refresh your memory on it and you can show it to a capital investor. So that's what we ended up doing on this.
Yeah, one. No, we took that video that you put together with the pics and the video and the explanation, and it actually went in our underwriting link, the link that our team works on, and that gets sent to our capital investors so that they could see the video too. And frankly, I know we used to do that back in the day and it was helpful then. It's beneficial now. We should do more when we have cool kinds of properties and projects and things that we lent on. We should do more of it. So we definitely encourage you to do the same.
No doubt.
Goes a long way.
Yeah. So anyways, you know, these are just pictures that we're going through of the condition. I mean, as you can see, this property is pretty far along, right? And you know, here's the parking garage, you know, and they just needed money to get this thing to the end, you know, get this thing to the table, you know, get this thing finalized. So, you know, they can officially move their church. So their date to move their church in was the week before Thanksgiving because they're doing services for Thanksgiving in this facility. And 50% of the apartments, not that that's really, you know, it's indirectly related to this, but 50% of the apartments from the developer were already leased up as well. So overall, it was a good project. We talked to a lot of other DC developers and investors who are like, yeah, that's a pretty awesome deal. So we were happy. We were able to secure it, and it came from a broker. It came from a broker that reached out and wanted to see if we were interested in doing it. And I'll tell you, you know, these days we're not going to as many properties as we did back in the day, but I'm glad we put our eyes on this. We probably wouldn't have done this deal 100%. If we didn't put our eyes on it. The way that the deal was presented to us was very, very different than the way that we structured it or the way that we made sense of it. And when the broker sent it to us, and this is, let me tell you, if you get broker business, you know, this is good advice. Humbly, this is good advice. I'm telling you that, like, get on the phone with the borrower and get the whole side of the story. Not that a broker is lying or trying to mislead you. Sometimes they just don't know what questions they need to ask or what's important to you as a lender, right? So we ended up, talking to the broker, didn't fully get the story. First, we thought that we were going to be the lender on the entire 180,000 square foot property. Then I did some homework and I scraped land records, and I saw that they had a $50 million loan against it from a local bank. I'm like, okay, that's interesting. But then we did some more research, And we saw that there were 6 lots, and 3 of them were unencumbered, 3 of them weren't unencumbered, and those 3 lots represented the 18,000 square feet as part of the condo regime for this building. So, it was a big loan amount. So we did some additional due diligence. We talked to the developers. We talked to a lot of parties involved. And yes, we did more heavy lifting than we would normally do on a regular deal, but it was also a bigger deal than we would normally do. So it made sense to do it. And we didn't spend much time, and we certainly didn't spend any due diligence money until it was something that, number one, we were interested in, and number two, the borrowers agreed to our term. And that's a good lesson, right? Don't start going to properties and, outlaying capital and tons of time until the borrower agrees to your terms. And the borrower did agree with our terms. And after we negotiated everything, right, which took a little bit of time, they signed our term sheet. They paid our $4,000 in due diligence so we could get some more environmental work done and appraisal work done. I'm trying to think what other type of due diligence we did on this one. After we had that in place, then we went to the property, right? Then we went all in. And it was like, cool, let's get this thing to the table. And just for time's sake purposes, typically we tell people 2 weeks from the day that they commit to proceed with us. And that's what happened.
For commercial stuff, yeah.
On commercial stuff. Residential stuff can be much quicker than that, obviously. But that's usually a good timeline. People understand it, and all in all, it worked.
Yeah, totally. And it was, I think people do jump the gun sometimes in terms of like going to check out a property before they've committed to do the deal, before the borrower agrees on terms, like stuff like that, right? And that, especially around a big metro area like DC, that's a half a day project, right? We drive down there, it's 40 minutes away or something, meet with them, walk around, we grab some lunch with Dave Bauer afterwards, came back. Like, it's a half day. It's a half a day. So I definitely would not recommend jumping the gun and going to visit all kinds of properties before you have a deal in place and deposit and the rest of it, right? Pro tip that probably everyone learns the hard way after wasting a bunch of days going to check out properties and they don't turn into deals. So anyway, deal spotlight on this one. I hope you guys got some value from how we structured this, sourced it, everything else. And we will see everyone inside hardmoneymastermind.com and next time here on the Private Lenders Podcast.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Private Lenders Podcast. Please note that the opinions stated by all the speakers on this show are only opinions and not intended for legal, financial, or accounting advice. Please make sure to always check with your own legal, accounting, and financial professionals. If you enjoyed this episode of the Private Lenders Podcast, we'd appreciate it if you would spread the word. Make sure to check out hardmoneymastermind.com, the #1 free community for new and experienced private and hard money lenders.